How is it that in 2021, a Nintendo 64 game can be graded, sealed, and sold for $1.5 million? Before we get into talking about how this Super Mario 64 was sold for $1.5 million, let's go ahead and talk about kind of the history of how gaming has been. Now, we're going to go really quickly through it and see why games are worth what they are at certain points, and then we'll talk about the big elephant in the room that is the Super Mario 64 selling for $1.5 million. So first off, obviously the NES was very popular and games like Little Samson shot up in value, and actually, if you didn't know, Little Samson the cartridge alone is worth about $2,000 right now, but if it's complete, it's worth $5,000. Yes, $5,000. That's insane. And then you continued on to the Super Nintendo, where you got games like Earthbound, which is around $200 to $300 just the loose cartridge, and around $1,000 complete. And that's crazy. And then you move up to the Nintendo 64, which is where we currently are, and kind of the ebb and flow and the prices that fluctuates and goes up and down over time. So like we said, NES started, then that kind of wore down to the Super Nintendo, and then that wore down to the Nintendo 64, and so on and so forth. So basically, as generations that grew up with the game got money and were able to buy things, that's when we saw the value rise, which is kind of interesting because right now, the GameCube games are starting to shoot up a little bit. So if you have a GameCube collection, your games might be worth some money. Or if you're wanting to collect for the GameCube, you might want to do that before the games go too high. But with that being said, why did this game sell for $1.5 million? Now, first off, I want to start by saying we talked about how it was going up in kind of the prices based on the systems, but at the same time, behind the scenes, there was a few companies, and one particular that started actually grading games. Well, what does that mean? Well, you would basically send in a game or a box or a sealed box, and you would say, hey, I want this sealed game rated or graded, and then you would pay a certain amount of money, and then they would send it back to you in a plastic box that was supposed to be tamper proof, basically to say, hey, this box game is worth this value because it is a condition 95, or it's the 10 out of 10. And this has actually happened with cards and trading cards and stuff like that way before gaming, but it moved into gaming, and that's when I saw this, and I thought it was kind of weird to see people taking games like, say, they have boxed games. This obviously isn't going to be graded, but maybe in the future someone would grade this. But they had boxed games like maybe anything off the shelves I have, or maybe an Earthbound boxed or something like that, and they would pay this company to end up grading it, putting it in plastic to protect it, and saying what it was graded. And that kind of surprised some people a few years ago when this started happening, but something else actually happened as well. Some big auction sites were starting to get interested in gaming. They realized there was money to be made, and they started getting into it. And that kind of, long story short, gets us to today, or well, the last week, where we did see a Super Mario Bros. 64, well, it's not Super Mario Bros. Super Mario 64 sealed, was graded, and then sold at auction for $1.5 million. Now, what does this exactly mean? Someone paid $1.5 million for a sealed game. Now, I've got like 2 sealed games. I don't know if you could see them back there. I've got a Metroid on the NES and a Paperboy on the NES. Now, I don't collect sealed games. I like to play them, and so sealed games for me just aren't there. Now, those 2 games I bought because they were really cheap on Craigslist like 4 years ago, and so I picked them up. But to be honest, I don't like sealed games because usually, well, one, they just stay on your shelf, or two, you have to open them in order to play them, which diminishes the value, which kind of makes it pointless. So when I get sealed games, I put them in protective cases, and that's about that. They stay on the shelf and look cool, but I can't play them. Well, thankfully the games that I have that are sealed, I have copies, I have loose cartridges, so that's okay there. But these prices are crazy. Now, if we talk about that Metroid that I have sealed up there, it's worth about $200 to $300 as it is not graded, just sealed. Which I think is kind of cool because I paid 50 bucks for it. But if I got it graded, it would be worth way more than that, which just doesn't really make sense to me. I have no use for it. So some people say, hey, that's an investment. It's not there for me. For me, I don't think having a game as an investment. I think of a game as entertainment. Now, yes, some of my games, obviously, if you've watched this channel, you've seen how I talk about prices and how the prices of games fluctuate. But that's not because I'm thinking it's an investment purpose. That's because I think you should get those games when they're cheap. That way, whenever the games skyrocket, you'll have them and can enjoy them. So that's kind of the way I like to do it. I like to see where the trends are and all that. But what does that mean exactly for game collectors? Is everyone who has a sealed game gonna go in and start grading their games? Probably. That is a hefty price tag. Now, I talked to some friends about this a little bit, and it doesn't really make sense to us. We looked at price charting and figured out, hey, you could get a graded one, or I guess it was non-graded. You could get a sealed copy of this game for like $4,000 to $5,000 and probably get it graded for maybe another grand, and then you're good. It's less than $10,000, but someone's paying $1.5 million, which blows my mind. So why? Why is this happening? One thing. People who used to have the Nintendo 64 have nostalgia, and you cannot put a price tag on nostalgia, especially to people that have money that they can spend. Now, yes, I have a big collection and I spend money on games, but I don't have nearly that much money. I don't have much. It is what it is, but someone to go out and spend $1.5 million on one game, to me, is crazy. And so I'm not about that. I think it's weird. I think it's probably pretty lame. And that's kind of why I wanted to talk about this. I could see that person saying, yeah, I bought that. It was $1.5 million in passing. And then someone else will think that's what it's worth. And then the price will just artificially inflate to that. And I'm not about that. Now, yes, I don't know if you can see it back there. There is an actual boxed Super Mario 64, and I have it in a plastic case just to keep it protected, but I'm not gonna get it graded. Let's be honest, I don't care about that stuff. I take the cartridge out of the box if it's in there, and I play the game. So that's what it's about. So I kind of wanted to just stand here, talk to you guys, kind of let you know what I'm thinking, kind of how the game prices has been, and wanted to ask you, is this weird? Because it feels really weird to me, and I'm not sure I like it. I think it's strange and overinflated, overpriced. So is this something like the art world that's kind of like trying to get involved with games? I don't know, but I don't want to see people overpay for games. So if you're looking to buy graded games or games in general, look up the value, because $1.5 million is not worth it for a sealed Super Mario 64. So with that being said, comment down below and let me know what you think about this whole thing. But for the most part, that's all I got. Peace.